This is That Marketing Podcast.
Made by marketers, for marketers.
Welcome to another edition of That Marketing Podcast, brought to you by Spotlight UK. Today on the podcast, we welcome Dr. Dave Chaffey, founder of Smart Insights, to talk about CRO, conversion rate optimization. Dave offers recommendations of the kinds of tests you can run and the tools you can use for doing so. He also shares results from experiments that Smart Insights have run on their own website and tells us his rule of thumb for predicting how your results are going to turn out. I hope you enjoy and happy marketing. So, Dave, first of all, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today.
That's fine, Richard. It's good to be here. It's a favourite topic of mine, CRO or CRO, however you like to say it. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Let's start with the basics. What does CRO or conversion rate optimization actually mean? How should we go about calculating it, and what does a good benchmark rate look like?
Yeah, well, probably means different things to different people, how involved they are with it. I think at its simplest and where people often start, it's people thinking of A/B testing of landing pages where you're going to test different alternatives. So you're reviewing your current, say, form for email sign up against a new idea to try and boost that rate of email sign up. So you've got a like champion challenger type approach, so A/B testing. But in larger organizations, you have people who focus on this. This is their whole working world, and it becomes much more complex. It's a series of structured tests, a whole program really of research as well. So you might do focus groups to understand what the barriers to conversion are, how you describe the benefits. So really going into the psychology. And then of course, it's quite a complex customer journey. Many people won't visit just on their first visit, they won't convert. They may visit a site multiple times on different devices, different landing pages. So you're trying to piece together the big picture of what makes people convert, and then to make changes across the whole site to support that.
Okay, you mentioned email sign-ups there. Is that the only thing that you define as a conversion, or are there other metrics that marketers can take into account when they're measuring what their conversion rate is?
Yeah, there's many you can look at. I think that's a good example because it's one that applies across all types of site. It is very much business specific, but if you think about perhaps an e-commerce retail site, they would want to acquire email addresses to encourage that first purchase, and you'll often see retailers have those pop-ups, those like boxes with 10% off your first order, for example. But in other sectors, I think email and data capture to profile the prospects important as part of lead generation as well. So where it's a longer buying process and it's more involved, you see email capture and signing up to subscribe. That's a good area to optimize as well.
Okay, so these processes you're putting, what's the end benefit for anyone who's listening to this and thinking, well, I don't have time to do that, why should I bother? What's your best answer for them?
Well, more depends what the marketing, the business outcomes you want from your site, but really any business that's got a website should have goals defined within Google Analytics, which are what's going to drive the future growth of their business. So if I take Smart Insights for an example, we've got we're a freemium site, we're an education site where you can subscribe for training on online marketing, but we've also got a free membership so people can sample our courses and our templates. So we've got goal 3, I know off by heart in Google Analytics, which is our free membership, and we're looking to increase that. And those people who sign up for our free membership we would explain our proposition to them. We would send free templates and samples. So by increasing those free memberships, that naturally then leads through a nurturing process to more paid memberships as well. And I think we've found through working, we've actually worked with a specialist conversion rate optimization agency, which I think it's a good idea if this is a new area for you. Maybe you don't have the skills in-house to look at an independent consultant or maybe a small agency who that's their whole focus, working through the process. But we saw some big increases back in the day. It's quite a few years ago. We work with them now because we've now got the skills internally. But I think we were generating something like 2,500–3,000 leads a month, so new contacts into the database, not qualified leads. But we were able to increase that towards 5,000 new contacts per month. So that was a big increase, and that then translated into a sales increase. So certainly you will ultimately, if it's the right type of traffic, the right type of contacts into the database, you will increase sales. But I think it's important not to look at it too simplistically and think, well, we need to get the right type of audience, and you could segment different types of visitors. So how many arrive from, say, social media against organic search or paid search, and see how the conversions vary, and see if you're in B2B, see the different profiles of people who are signing up to learn more. So yeah, I'm a big advocate of it, and I think A/B testing is just the start, but it's a very important useful start.
Really interesting, Dave. So you mentioned you had quite a big increase there, and obviously from a best practice point of view, and I know it's never always good to do stuff that is kind of past practice, but what would be your top tips for particular optimizations or kind of current testings? Where would you start from if you were to implement it yourself or having that discussion with the agency?
Yeah, good question. Hi, Simon. Yeah, it's I think having a benchmark is a good starting point, and you do need the goals in place in Google Analytics or whatever optimization tool you're using. So I mentioned there we've got that goal 3. When I'm working with businesses and consulting, one of the first questions I'll often ask is, well, let's have a look at your goals in Google Analytics, and they're not always set up. I mean, larger, more mature businesses, they will be, I'm sure. So then when you've got that goal in place, you can then benchmark against others, and that can be useful for making the case for investment, not so much in the tools, but having the time to focus on CRO. So one thing people listening can look at if they want to benchmark, because I'm such a fan of this technique, must be over 5 years ago now, I created a compilation of conversion rates in different sectors. So if you Google, I think it's e-commerce conversion rates, will probably take you to the page that's top, but it actually looks at B2B conversion as well. And if you look at that, you see there is a very wide range. I think in B2C, the latest Adobe digital index there, so this is for larger retailers, you might see, say, 1.4% in consumer electronics down at the bottom. That's quite tough to get people to convert, maybe because they go in store instead. Whereas if it's something like gifts or pharmacy, it's more commoditized, more of an instant low value purchase. It goes up to 5%. So maybe if you're working in one of those sectors and you see you're way out of line with what others in that sector are, that can get your managers interested to run the test, because it's having that commitment. Now, I know from working with Spotler for a long time that many of your customers are business to business, and I think there you actually see, when it's the classic lead generation, maybe based on a white paper download, you you see a much bigger variation in conversion rate. So I'm looking at some data here for business services, and the average there it's again about 3% for that email lead generation, 3.4%, but at the top end it goes up to 16%. So that really shows the opportunity, really, where at whatever level you're at now, if you do the research and you run sufficient tests, then you can get those sort of improvements. And in some other sectors, I've got credit and lending. That's an average of 5.5, goes up to 24% at the top end. Higher education, that goes up to 11.5 at the top end. So that benchmarking is the very first step, but of course there's a lot more involved beyond that.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually, those benchmarking. We'll definitely include that as a resource. So once you got the benchmark, Dave, how would you go about trying to then optimize? What things would you kind of look to pick? You know, would it be the classic of testing colors on a button, or would you test some kind of wording? Do you have any kind of things that you would do over something else?
Yeah, the button example is a good one, because I think people will often, they may have read articles which I think there was one once, it was called, what was it, the $200 million button. It was for a retailer like Dell, and they made some change, such as changing a button label from learn more, something quite generic, to something more specific with a value implied. So something like, you know, save now. And so there are those wins, and people often talk about a silver bullet. But what I'd say, and that's fine as a place to start, but I think you may be in for a disappointment if you just try button color, because really it's all about the value that you're offering. And very often it's the copy and the creative alongside that which will make a difference. So with landing pages, for example, if someone's coming through from Google, it's all about relevance and getting someone to stay on the page. So how your main headline and then the intro copy that follows into that may well give you a bigger uplift than changing the button color. So one of the limitations with A/B testing is, if you have this new challenger page, you could change lots of things. So you could change the button, you could change the copy, the creative, you can change form fields, and so on. But if you hopefully get an improvement, you don't actually know what has caused that improvement. So I think if people are starting out, you need to break out all the types of improvements you could make. And really, the guys who do this professionally, they talk about hypothesis testing. So the hypothesis might be that if we change the main headline to have a value, better illustrate the value, then that will increase conversion rates. So I think I'd break down all of the different alternatives, and you could maybe test those individually, rather than changing everything about the page and then seeing what the result is.
I think that's a really good point, yeah, because we've done that before ourselves, actually, where we've done a multivariant test and didn't realize you change everything and you get an uplift, and you don't know what's actually caused that uplift. So I think the idea of doing a single variant test, like you were saying, whether it's adding a figure into a headline, or we mentioned changing a color from one color to another, or a bit of text and copy, is really important, because you want to know what it is that's actually caused that uplift.
Yeah, I've got a nice example of this, actually. I was mentioning earlier, we were working with this conversion rate agency, and we've, like the retailers, we've got a light box on our site for our free membership, because we find it works. And we put quite a lot of time into the messaging to show the value, and we thought it was quite a nice visual look, but it didn't have the trust factor in there of any testimonials. So all we did, we found 3 different quotes of how people had benefited from the free membership. And then, because we've got quite a high volume of visits to our site, we found just within a 2-week test that we actually increased conversion rate of our lead generation effectively by 10%, which is a fantastic outcome just through changing that copy alone. I'm not saying everyone's going to get those benefits, and sometimes it is a good idea to sort of shake it up and go for a big change. I know the guys we were working with, conversion rate experts, they caution against what they call meek tweaking, which is things like just changing button color or label. And maybe you actually need to completely rethink the model of your landing page, look at the approaches that competitors are doing, or maybe in your sector everyone's doing the same approach, so look out of sector at what other people have used creatively. So I don't think it's very easy to talk about best practices, but you know, there's no right or wrong. It's just being systematic, I think, and not giving up at the first hurdle because you've changed a button color and it hasn't made a whole lot of difference.
I think that's the thing. Yeah, it's really good to have that kind of that set out of ideas of what you're going to test, and not give up. We've definitely found that after the first couple of weeks where something's not done or not happened. Also, conversely, we had a really good example where we changed something and our conversion dropped by 50%. So don't be afraid to kind of stop something if you see the negative happening.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, because I saw a talk at a trade show when we were still doing trade shows in Manchester. I think it was an e-commerce expo, and it was one of the big multi-channel retailers, Shop Direct, someone like that. And he was looking at their testing that they did, and he had a good rule of thumb. So I think we've seen this as well. Depends on the type of test, but he said a third of tests will actually do nothing at all to your conversion. A third of tests will bomb, and like you were saying there, it will perform less well, but a third will actually give you a significant uplift. So I think that's a good benchmark to have, because you can set expectations. If you've been making the case for doing more CRO or starting out with colleagues and they're going to expect some amazing result, you can say, well, it's going to depend, and we're not going to get it right first time, because you can't really second guess the way that customers are going to think. And I think that's why it's important to have the customer research and the focus groups, as well as just using your internal ideas and knowledge, because we don't always get it right as marketers. We're human after all.
One thing I wanted to pick up on, you talked about.
Sorry, Richard.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to pick up, you talked about how content kind of works on the landing page, and unfortunately we know that even the best landing page won't convert everybody. So are there CRO tips you can apply to blogs and other long form content that people kind of land on as a second round and gives you another bite to the cherry, as it were?
Yeah, definitely. We've done a lot of work on this at Smart Insights, because we're fortunate to get 500,000 visits a month, not that good, through our organic search. So 80% of those are organic search. And thinking of benchmarks, it's quite challenging with a blog. The majority of people will bounce, however good your content is. So I think our bounce rate for our blog is around 65-70% when I last looked. But you can really boost the conversion rate to free sign up by using the right sort of approach. And I'd say, well, when we started this, of course, I remember actually I wrote a blog post, it must be 10 years ago now, called The Perfect Landing Page, and it worked quite well within organic search, and we were getting a lot of visits from that. So the sort of obvious things that talked about were things like delivering relevance through testing the headline and testing the copy. I think another interesting issue, not necessarily with blogs, but with all types of pages, is the length of the page, because people often who work in CRO, they often talk about reductive tests. So you might find with your homepage, for example, that if you do a shorter homepage by removing one of the sections, that can increase conversion, but it could be quite the opposite as well. And often you find that longer, well-structured, but longer homepages which talk to different audiences and their needs, they may convert more. But going back, Richard, to the sort of classic blog approach, I'd say if you're on desktop, and we still find, as B2B, we find we're about 60–70% first-time visitors that are still on desktop. It's important, I think, to actually have a right sidebar that people can see the benefits. So have some panels on the right which are giving some reasons for someone to sign up. Other things to consider are having a sticky header. If you look at the Smart Insights site, you'll see as you scroll down that the top nav doesn't disappear, and we're trying to offer value so people can learn about our toolkits there. Aside from that, and if you're on mobile, you would likely, the classic blog is you go through all the content, and then down at the bottom there's a call to action. And we did find on desktop as well that bottom call to action does perform better than the right sidebar. So we might have an offer, and we would, with our blog, another tip here is to try and make it relevant by topics. So we would offer guidance, say, on digital strategy or SEO or social content marketing. And then what we tested was, could you have a different offer or a different bit of free content for each of those? So if you're on the content marketing page, blog page, it will offer you a free guide to content strategy, for example. And that did work quite well. But we actually found that because people are interested in digital strategy overall, I think apart from social media, that's what worked best for us. But a final tip here, just to complete the picture, is, and I think many business blogs fail this sort of test. They particularly sort of simplistic short posts, they don't have a lot of what I would call inline promotional content or persuasive content. So just having, say, some hyperlinks that go off to a relevant free download, or if you look at Smart Insights, we've got a lot of panels our designers have created within the body of the copy, and you would often have those within the first page or certainly the second scroll, because people may be interested in that, but the reality is most people aren't going to scroll all the way through a 5,000 word blog article. So think about having those inline call to actions in the copy as well.
Some really great ideas there. And sorry, Richard, again. I just heard, Dave, I've got one burning question I had. So it sounds like landing pages are a must for any marketer, whether they're B2B or B2C. But there was an interesting bit you mentioned a few minutes ago around, you called them light boxes. I think I call them pop-ups. So the tools and tactics, if somebody doesn't form fill or do the action that you want them to do on your landing page, it sounds like you implement a few other tools. Can you just go into that a little bit more? So it sounds like you use pop-ups, maybe chat bots. How would you go about using those, and kind of any top tips on those type of tools?
That's a challenging one, I think, for many businesses, because I think most marketers, and I've asked this if I'm doing a talk face to face, what do you think light boxes are a good solution for lead generation? And most people won't put their hand up, or if you ask, do you hate light boxes, everyone will put their hand up because we're bombarded by them. But I would say you've got to seriously consider them and at least test them. There's a reason that retailers, who are very commercial types of businesses, use them. They do work to increase sales. And I was anti light boxes for the same reasons we all are. But we did, when we started working with this agency, they were keeping us honest and saying, well, you've got to test this, Dave. So Stu and I, my co-founder, we said, okay, let's do this. We'll try and make them as good as we can. One of the reasons we were a bit resistant to this is that we already had all these calls to action on the blog that I was just describing before. But I think from memory, it was a 40% increase in new contacts into the database that we got. And of course, you get that every month from that point on. So that's a pretty large increase. So I would say, look at the options. We've actually, I think we sort of rolled our own, we developed our own light boxes initially, but these days the guy who looks after our lead generation on site, he uses a tool called Opt-in Monster for where you can run different tests. So it's not quite, it's like A/B testing for light boxes effectively. And we find within those, depending where in the site and the type of blog page you serve that light box, they might have, say, a 3 to a 12% conversion rate, whereas our average on the blog is only 2%. So I'd say definitely consider light boxes, but there are, if you don't feel they fit your brand and they're too in your face, there are other options. Like you'll have seen those panels that appear on the bottom of the screen, and you can still scroll through the content. You can shut them down. They're not so interruptive. So if you don't think you can get your colleagues to buy into light boxes, think about those panels, and they're great for like surfacing whatever your best content is, or we use them for a monthly campaign. So we have a different offer. So it might be, hey, we've got this, the digital summit coming up in a month, or we've got a new free resource. So yeah, definitely think beyond the classic landing page as well.
Yeah, and we're definitely with you on that one. I think it is that scenario where you see so many, so you kind of condition yourself to think, oh my God, not another one. But actually, when you implement them, you do see the benefit. We definitely get many more form fills when we have pop-ups on our website, as long as the offering is decent.
Yeah, it's all about relevance and value. If you've got, say, as I know you have, you've got relevant learning material that's going to help a B2B marketer, and the values there, you've got relevance and value, it's bound to influence some people. I would say you've got to be a bit sensitive and like test how long it is before the pop-up is served, and there's different tools you can use. So you can do it on number of seconds. You can serve it when someone's moving the mouse upwards, like they would if they were going to close a window or go to the top nav. That might be more effective. So you can test those sort of timing for when you serve the light boxes as well.
Okay, it was something I picked up on. I think it was a LinkedIn article. I'll try and dig it out for the actual web page when this goes live. But a potential way that this marketer was talking about capturing, especially second-time visitors, is actually to run sort of personalization on the home page itself, or on the actual web pages, rather than just the landing pages. I just wondered if that's something you've seen anybody do, and is it worth the effort? Is the conversion worth it, or is it a lot of work for a tiny little uptick, and thus probably not worth it for most sort of small and medium businesses?
Yeah, I think they might be constrained by the technology they're using, but hey, if they're using WordPress and there's a there's a plugin to support that, or if you're I think you guys use Google Optimize alongside your landing page building tool, and that is well known, I think, as a free, great for getting started A/B testing tool. But what people may not know is that Google Optimize also has personalization options, which can help with increasing relevance that way. I would say another perhaps way of looking at this, and really a different tip to what you're asking there, is you can think of what I call segmented customer journeys. So if you look at, say, the Smart Insights homepage, it's something we've only done in the last couple of years, is through our research, we've found that people are either, when it comes to online learning around marketing, people are either, they're looking to develop their own personal skills, there may be looking to actually improve the performance of the business, so increase leads and sales, or maybe they're responsible for a team and they're looking at those skills development. So what we did on our homepage is we created 3 buttons which take people off in those 3 directions, and then there's effectively a slightly different landing page explaining the proposition for each person. Another way you might do that within B2B is you might have different customer journeys for each sector. You very often would via the top navigation. And yeah, our experience is that really does help conversion. And I think we've seen this as well from email, because if you send out a relevant email follow-up for someone subscribing that's relevant to their sector and their role, we've seen you get a significantly higher response than a one-size-fits-all type welcome email.
Absolutely, and you sort of started touching on there with customer journeys. But the whole point of this is the conversion itself isn't probably the sale in terms of when and how we think of it in marketing. Are there sort of broad brush next steps that should always come after a conversion, or does it very much depend on the industry and what kind of conversion you've had?
Yeah, I think you should map out, as part of that broader marketing and digital marketing strategy. I think many people use personas now, and in our persona templates, what we recommend is having a content mapping, we would call it. So as someone goes from that initial interaction with your business and they're starting to get familiarity with your propositions, that would be like the top of funnel content to generate the leads, but then you've got the middle and bottom of funnel content, and you should really try and map out how you serve that both on the website and through email interactions as well. Something I didn't come back on, which you mentioned earlier, you were saying about the chat box type approach, I think, Simon, and we use a tool that when someone has subscribed, it will say we've got our, like, we know the content that's most likely to persuade people to, we've got some benchmarking, maturity benchmarking, which will encourage people to go for a paid subscription. So we can serve that up as a personalized message on site. So that's like our rule for our contact strategy, if you like. And equally, so that's our on-site nurturing, but then we've got our email nurturing, where if you think I think virtually everyone would have an auto response when you subscribe. It would be, hey, thank you for subscribing, but it varies widely in the quality of that follow-up communication, and yet that's the most important interaction. So I think as part of CRO overall, to get the sale, if you like, look at that welcome email and the quality of that, and think beyond. Very often those welcome emails will just be, here's your download, and they don't really start to talk in a subtle way about the brand and what that can benefit. And maybe to do that properly, you need a sequence of 3 welcome emails. That's what we use, and we'll try to target them by role as well. So you can see, once you get into discussing CRO, it becomes much more complex, and there's a much bigger opportunity than just working on A/B testing alone.
Absolutely, yeah, we do a similar thing. I think if you download one of our resources, you get a series of other emails that are kind of tailored to about the section of we kind of divide it into marketing automation, email marketing, and lead generation. And we try and follow up with additional relevant content linked to what you've downloaded. With that kind of sequence in place, is it helpful to think of another stage of conversion? So if someone downloads a resource, we call that a conversion. But then if they book a demo off the back of that nurture, is that also a conversion, or is that just confusing the terminology?
No, those are certainly conversions as well. And if you're new to this, you may not have heard of, I think most people who work in CRO have heard of Avinash Kaushik. So he's the Google, the digital marketing evangelist at Google. And if you ever get a chance to hear him speak or check out his blog, I'd really recommend it, because he's got a lot of advice, practical advice on where to start, and in particular how to measure within Google Analytics. And he talks about macro and micro conversions. And I think it's as part of your CRO program, you should list all of those macro conversions. And they might be, we've talked a lot about getting a contact or a lead. So that would be a macro conversion. It's a major conversion that's important to the health of the business. And likewise, when you deliver a sale, if you're taking transactions online, that would be a macro conversion also. But a micro conversion could be much smaller, but it's still showing that someone is progressing on the journey. So it could be, maybe you send out one of your welcome emails and it says, oh, we've got a video showing someone how to use this feature in our platform. So someone viewing that video would be a micro conversion. And then if you've got the right type of platform, like I think your platform offers this, you can score people based on their level of activity. So if someone has, say, viewed 5 different pages or downloaded 5 different pieces of content, and those can have different scores, you'll know they're further down the customer journey, and then you can maybe do a different form of follow-up with them, either maybe by phone or serving different content by email or on site. So yeah, definitely map out all of those sort of interactions and try to move to scoring them, and then you can see the people who are really interested in your proposition and are most likely to convert. Focus on them.
Okay, I think that's a really good sort of actionable takeaway, which is what we always try and deliver for the audience there. So that's right, define all your conversion points and your, as Dave says, micro and macro conversions, and basically start testing. I think what we've taken from this is that there's all sorts of things, and we can't give you a magic potion of this is what will work for you, but here are the tools and the sort of starter techniques you can use. So go away and start split testing, everybody. Dave, thank you so much for sharing all your expertise with us for the podcast.
You're very welcome. I hope some of those tips we've covered there are useful. And yeah, I think it's about having that commitment. Like all things in life, you will have setbacks and disappointment, but the main success factor is to have a program where you're trying to test something each month. So even if you're a small business, you can say, okay, this month or this quarter, we're going to test the homepage, and then we're going to move on to other parts of the customer journey. So yeah, one other last tip there.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of That Marketing Podcast. You clearly have wonderful taste. We hope you found the content useful and enjoyed it. We'd love you to subscribe wherever it is you're listening to us. Maybe leave us a review if you can think of a topic that you'd like us to cover, or even if you fancy coming on the podcast and sharing your own experience on a particular topic. You can reach us at marketingteam@spotler.co.uk. Thanks once again, and happy marketing.